Intro. All right. So, hey, Mike.
Hey.
So this is my friend Mike Mosley. Mike, we've known each other for about, I think we met a little over a year ago, probably, through our friend Paul Prater. And Mike is quickly becoming one of my best friends here in Arkansas. And when Mike's Mike's an attorney and has told me some fun stories about some of his cases, and one of them we're going to get into here shortly. Mike got to litigate, is that how you say it, or argue in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, which is pretty rad. And you had a 9-0 decision.
Yeah, and so 9-0. There were two rulings. So it's a police pursuit.
Yeah, we'll get into the details.
But there's two rulings. As to one of the rulings, it was 9-0. As to the other ruling, it was 7 justices and 2 didn't dissent or concur. They just didn't join in that part of the opinion.
Okay. How rare is it to get a 9-0? Is it pretty rare?
Well, I haven't only had one case.
But I mean, Supreme Court wide to get all of those assholes to agree on one thing is pretty rare. Especially, I mean, and now this is
different. We have
it's a different court, right?
I mean, especially in these kinds of cases, I think it's probably pretty rare. But I've never really taken the time to survey that.
Yeah. I'll have to look that up. Somebody can look that up.
You hear about a lot of 5-4 decisions.
Yeah. And as with the Supreme Court now, which we'll get into as well, it's partisan. As much as they say it's not, it is absolutely partisan. So,
I think it's a political beast. I mean, how can it not be? Let's think about it. Okay.
Right.
They're appointed by a partisan politician.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, and then it's also contingent upon, the Senate and the makeup of the Senate, and those are politicians. And as much as they want to say, or anybody wants to say, they're just there to do justice. And I'd like to believe that is the case, but I disagree with the number of decisions have over the years.
So how did you? We're going to start at the beginning. How did you get here? How did you get to be an attorney? You were born and raised in Central Arkansas.
Right. Lived here my whole life. I'm 48. I've never been out of the country. I've never had a passport. Don't travel much, and that's a double-edged sword. But how I became an attorney? I went to high school here in north of the river, North Little Rock. It wasn't North Little Rock. It's actually the school's called Sylvan Hills, and I had a history professor there. His name was John Rapp, and he was a hip guy, and I was playing guitar and had long hair and was kind of a cut up, I suppose, in class. Never a serious student, but he was a hip guy. He took us to see Malcolm X when that movie came out as a field trip, and then we would go to the mall, and most of the students would go to the arcade. But Professor Rapp.
All right, somebody said 36 of all decisions are unanimous per the Washington Post.
Oh, wow.
So that's more than I would have expected.
That's my sister.
Oh, nice. So I'm sorry. So,
most of the students would go to the arcade when we would go after the movie or whatever field trip we were on. He would ask me to go to the Coffee Beanery, which was a fancy coffee shop, I guess, at the time in the mall. And I guess that's probably where I know that's where I had my first sort of not black coffee, like a mocha or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know. One of the field trips was to go to law school. And the students that went were were the jury in the mock trials class where law students try a case, hypothetical case, right? And they, after the evidence was presented and everything, they put us in a room just like any other jury, and I was voted the foreman or the foreperson.
Yeah.
And the students, the professor, and my professor, Professor Rapp, were watching from another room on closed circuit TV. And I don't know, I took notes, I guess, and followed the evidence. And again, I wasn't a great student. I didn't have great grades. Just wanted to, play guitar.
Right.
And but he took me aside, and he said, "You should really consider doing this." Because and he told me, he said, "You followed the evidence. Whatever you use logic, and I don't know what I did, but it I guess he was a mentor to me, and so that made a big impression on me. And I went to University of Arkansas Little Rock for undergrad, and I would drive by the law school every day, going back and forth because it was basically a commuter college. I lived in North Little Rock, and I would drive by the law school every day. You had to drive past it in the interchange. And I just, lots of times, I don't know if every time, I thought about what he had said to me. And I was accepted to a master's program in psychology. And at the time I was working with, in undergrad with autistic children. I was doing behavioral intervention in-home with 3 different boys. And, through the state somehow, but also through this entity called the Wisconsin Early Autism Society. And that had a big impact on me. I wanted to do that. It was never, my first major was wildlife management.
Right, yeah.
I wanted to get a free
Park pass?
you get a free truck, and a four-wheeler, and a gun, and a boat.
Yeah, right.
And in a house, and you live in the woods. Growing up, I hunted. I'm from Arkansas. I effectively stopped doing that in 2003, for the most part. And I guess I've been in the woods a few other times. I like to go in the woods. But I get off track really easy. But the bottom line is that made an impression on me. And instead of doing the master's program in psychology, I took a year off and played in a band. And during that time, I took the LSAT, which is the entrance exam into law school. And my grades, my first year in undergrad, were terrible. I see my sister's watching, so I might as well say this. My first semester, my sister did all my work for me. And I'm grateful for her for that. She couldn't, though, take the geology test for me where you walk around and you identify the rocks.
Right.
So I was on my own there, But great lady. I got a great family. But anyways, so I took a year off, played in a band, took the LSAT, and even though I had been a bad student undergrad, I pulled it together and got a decent GPA, and I did good enough on the LSAT to get a small scholarship to law school here at the University of Arkansas Little Rock, which is now called the William H. Bowen School of Law. I was in law school when they changed the name, and Bill Clinton came to dedicate it, and Bill Bowen was still alive then, and so I don't know. People always tell you when you're a kid, you're good at this, you're good at that. People always said you're good at arguing. That may be fun when you're 20.
Right.
At 48, arguing's not so fun.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the kind of law you do, and you represent primarily municipalities, and through that, primarily law enforcement.
Correct.
And this is one of the things that we've talked about a lot in private conversations is you represent mostly police officers. And that we've talked a lot about, and we talked just briefly before we came on about there are good cops and there are bad cops.
Yes.
And sometimes you are tasked with representing good cops, and sometimes you're tasked with representing bad cops.
And I've told you this. I can count on one hand the number of what I would call, bad cop that I've represented. That doesn't prevent good police officers from being sued. A famous Arkansas Supreme Court justice long ago, I can't remember the name of the case, his name was George Rose Smith. He wrote, you and me are neighbors, right? We have no incentive to sue one another. But the person that gets arrested is already cheesed off
Right.
at the police officer. Whether they've got a good lawsuit or not, the motivation that inspires somebody to sue is there. And so, there are frivolous cases. There are borderline cases. There are meritorious cases. But the thing, and people assume they know my politics because I've done this. Look, I took the job. I practiced law nearly 22 years now. I took the job in 2005, and that's what got. And before that, I had also been a public servant because it gave me a $15,000 a year raise. I didn't know, where it was going to lead or anything like that. And without getting too personal, at the time, I needed more money a year. So I took it. And, it just, one guy I worked for one time said, he had 4 jobs when he was a young attorney before he sort of fell into his comfort zone. And I got on with police officers. Now, to talk what you're talking about, I have a philosophy about this. Look, there are police officers that use excessive force. And there are police officers that use appropriate force, if we're talking about force as a particular kind of lawsuit. And all these police officers are required, they're trained, but they're also required to be knowledgeable about complex constitutional doctrines that judges disagree about, okay? So let's take an example. You are a police officer for, let's say, a small municipality. So you make $30,000 a year. So you work the night shift, okay? And you go to work, and on any given night, at $30,000 working the night shift, you can be physically assaulted. You're going to be verbally berated. Maybe none of those things happen, but for $30,000 or $40,000 a year working the night shift, and your job entails that you may have to go get in a physical fight and come home, after that. I've seen it plenty of times. But the person that, let's say this example is, you're dealing with somebody who you have probable cause committed a crime. You attempt to apprehend them and they resist arrest. Okay? Violently sometimes.
Right.
Okay? That person is not bound by conforming their behavior to complex constitutional rules set by courts. So basically that person in doing whatever they're doing, resisting arrest, it involves physicality. You with me?
Yeah. I'm looking up the name because I don't want to get it wrong.
Plumb off.
So that brings us to plumb off, which is the.
And I want to
Okay. Yeah.
The officer has to, in that encounter, both engage in physicality, but also there's the cognition. They have to apply this complicated constitutional doctrine. And so, is that? I mean,
Well, that brings me up to
that for 30.
That brings up to a
grand
question
year?
that we're dealing with in Colorado right now. I know the state legislature is talking about it in Colorado, and I hope they're talking about it across the country. There's a group specifically in Colorado, and I imagine nationwide that wants requirements of a certain education level for police officers. You know, right now in most states, a police officer can get a police officer job, be handed a gun, be handed a badge, and be handed the authority of a police officer with a high school diploma. There's some that argue that there should be a level of education that comes with that, and I think what they're leaning towards with that is not just that you have to show that you can do the work, but it shows, you know. I guess it's just, you know, you need at least a bachelor's degree to be a nurse. You need at least a bachelor's degree to be a teacher. Now, I understand completely about the stresses of being a police officer and the shits that come with being the job. There are a lot of jobs that suck, man. You know, I mean, guys go on the railroad every day and can lose a leg or lose a, you know, sure. Teachers nowadays can go in the classroom and get shot.
Not get paid enough either.
So, and obviously don't get paid enough.
So you want to require more training. Me and a number of chiefs of police that I've represented over the years, we've had this conversation many times. I don't think anybody should differ with that. But if you're going to do, and we do have Commission on Law Enforcement Standards and Training. Law enforcement officers are required to go through a number of weeks of training that include, and I'm a certified law enforcement instructor, or it may have lapsed, but I've taught law enforcement, and that the legal side of it. But they have to learn the legal side of it. They have to learn the physical side of it. But I'm all for requiring more training, but we can't be diluted enough to require X number of training or a bachelor's degree and continue to pay somebody.
Well, and that's the shits of it. I mean, that's
$34,000 to go get beat up.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, and this there's a lot of comparisons here that can be drawn to teachers. You know, you require so much of teachers to give them shit pay and shit work environments and no support from the community. Or I don't say community, no support from the administration or the legislature. So let's just jump into it. The big one in 2004. Yeah, is that correct?
July of 2004.
You argued in front of the United States.
14. I argued. July of 2004. Okay.
So give us, Mike, if you would. Assume that nobody listening to this knows shit about Plumhoff. So start at the very beginning. What happened in July of 2004?
July 2004, two individuals were in a white Honda in West Memphis, Arkansas, and got pulled over by an officer named Joseph Fortham, one of my former clients. And in talking to him, when he got out, he asked the driver eventually to exit, and there were reasons, and you know why is you can read the opinion, but. Instead of do that, they sped away. And this is right at Interstate 40 from West Memphis, and they took Interstate 40 headed towards Memphis. 6 officers total, all of whom I represented, joined the chase eventually on I-40. The driver, a man named Donald Rickard, had a passenger, a lady named Kelly Allen. The speeds exceeded at times 100 miles an hour. There were
through residential or was it all highway? Okay.
But on the interstate,
on a busy interstate, not
counted the cars. There's either 24, 29 civilian cars that either had to pull over or were. I mean, these cars, the Honda and the police
weaved in
and out
at 100 miles plus.
And so how many kids were in those civilian
right?
cars?
You never know. Yep.
Right. And so, long story short. Or to the extent it can be, the chase continued over the DeSoto Bridge, which goes over the Mississippi River into Memphis.
Into Tennessee.
Yeah. They took the Danny Thomas the white car, pulled right out in front of a guy hauling a boat, causing him to lock it up. There's 3 videos. They're available. You can see them on the internet.
Yeah, go ahead and if you want, look this up. It's PLUMHOFF, and that's the name of the Supreme Court. And there are tons of videos. I looked it up last night.
Tons of videos, and then the oral argument that I did in 14 is also available
in audio.
Yeah. But anyways, long story short, they took the Danny Thomas exit. You're right there at St. Jude's Hospital at that point. They spin out one way or the other into a parking lot. The officers attempt to block them in to the parking lot, and they don't totally surround them. The white Honda starts going forward. I mean, there was debate about, whether they were ramming one of the police cars or it was just making contact. I'm not sure it matters.
At that point,
the
right.
video shows this is a front wheel drive car. It shows the front wheel drive spinning, running into, I believe it was Officer Gardner's car. At that point, Vance Plumhoff, one of my clients, used his firearm and shot at Mr. Rickard through the windshield. How many times, if he was hit, he had to have been hit at least once during that, I believe. There were officers in close proximity to that. Jimmy Evans, one of my clients, was trying to break the passenger's windshield with the butt of his gun, and they were trying to get him to relent and stop because this chase has already gone on for a long time.
Right.
And even after the first...
How long are we into it by now? 30 minutes?
Oh, no.
An hour?
No, 5.
Oh, okay.
But that's a long time.
Yeah, no, 5 minutes at 100 miles an hour is no joke.
And I'll say that, so he doesn't relent. It's patent from the videos. And even after Officer Plumhoff shot, he backs out because it didn't have him completely surrounded. And again, these are split-second game day decisions,
Right.
that are real easy to armchair quarterback. He backs out, and Lance Ellis, one of the officers, has to step out of the way. Had he not, he would have been
Run over. Yeah.
run over, and then proceeds forward. And I believe he'd already been shot at least once. Two of the other officers then shoot. I think the total number of shots were 15 if you count Plumhoff's first 3. Some of those shots were when the car was going by, and some of them were from behind. Either a bullet or a bullet fragment unintentionally, and that was undisputed. In response to our motion, it was undisputed that one of the bullets or bullet fragment hit Kelly Allen in the head. I don't know how many times Mr. Rickard was shot, but he drove down a certain distance around Jackson and Manassas in downtown Memphis and crossed the center line, obviously due to his injuries, I'm sure. There was a cinder block wall, 4 feet tall, 3 feet tall. And it was straight up. It wasn't a ramp, but as fast as the car was going, it ramped and landed on the front porch of a house.
Okay.
And at that point, the driver and passenger were, I believe, deceased at that point.
Okay.
And, it's a heavy video to watch.
Yeah, I imagine.
I had to watch it, So the case, they filed a case in 2005, a year later.
And these were the descendants of the two passengers in the car, the driver and the passenger.
The estate of the driver and the estate of the passenger separately sued
Okay.
in the state of Tennessee in state court. We engaged a lawyer there to remove them, as I recall, to federal court because they stated federal claims. I got to get licensed in the Western District of Tennessee federal court to handle the case. And me and a fellow lawyer that I worked with at the time, who I'm not going to say his name because he may not want me to, and our supervisor, who may not want me to say his name at the time, entered an appearance and began representing them. But 3 of the officers that shot were charged criminally in Shelby County, Tennessee. And I'm not sure that Arkansas had a similar criminal law that could have been used here to charge them. But I think they were charged with something along the lines of a negligent type homicide.
Okay.
And Tennessee criminal law apparently is very different. And so I moved to stay the case pending the outcome of those criminal charges. And that took a few years. And so it sat dormant while the criminal issues were going up and down in the Tennessee state courts. And they eventually got some kind of diversion, the officers did, where they were not criminally convicted of anything. And so then we reopened the civil case, take a couple depositions in Memphis. Well, they took a couple depositions, the plaintiff's attorneys, who I got to know real well and liked a lot. Gary K. Smith and Phil Campbell were two of the attorneys that represented, I think the attorneys that represented the estate of Rickard. And Frank Holloman was the attorney in Memphis that represented the estate of Allen. And I couldn't say enough nice things about these guys. It was one of the most congenial, and you know, I've had all kinds, but one of the most congenial cases I've ever dealt with. But I lost. I filed, after those two depositions, we did affidavits. We submitted a motion for summary judgment, which is just a motion, if you don't know the law, that says, Judge, here's the evidence, here's the videos. Based on all this shouldn't go to a jury.
Right, right.
Judge denied that as to the Rickard claim, because we had them joined eventually. But granted it as to the unintentional shooting of Miss Allen. He later, Judge Mays later reconsidered that. And that had to get briefed after the Supreme Court. So bottom line is we lost. So if you lose, one of the arguments we made was what is everybody's heard of, qualified immunity. Public servants get it. If their actions don't either A, violate the Constitution, and here the constitutional provision was the Fourth Amendment, excessive force is considered an unreasonable seizure.
Yep.
And if you don't violate the Fourth Amendment, you can get qualified immunity. Alternatively, if you did, but the law wasn't, the binding law from the U.S. Supreme Court or your circuit or whatever, wasn't clear enough to give notice to police that their conduct
was in violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Of the Fourth Amendment, then you can get qualified immunity. So we took an appeal to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. I had to get licensed there, which is housed in Cincinnati, Ohio. And initially, they dismissed the appeal. Didn't even let me brief it. And sought reconsideration, a rehearing, and they granted it. And we had oral arguments after we briefed it in Cincinnati, and I lost there. And they said, this has got to go to a jury. And I said, look, there's videos. And previous to this, there had been a case in 2007 called Scott versus Harris that relied on video evidence. And there, there's been some commentators, it's not three-dimensional. Video is not three-dimensional. The idea that it portrays everything is a fantasy, but I think here it portrayed enough.
Yeah.
So when we lost, I go to my clients and I sit down with them and I said, there's only one thing I can do left for a jury trial here. And I said, and it's a long shot at, and I said, don't get your hopes up. It's not going to happen. U.S. Supreme Court takes probably less than % of cases, 1%. And we petitioned for cert. We used outside counsel that had worked in Scott to assist in that. They did a good job. The court granted certiorari, the U.S. Supreme Court did, in November of 2013. And set briefing, our merits brief was due, I think, December the 27th. And I was told by the Supreme Court clerk, don't ask for an extension. We're not giving them.
Yep.
And so, one way or the other, the outside counsel no longer was on the case. And I'm not going to get into the niceties or lack thereof of how that happened. But what happens is when anybody gets a case accepted to the Supreme Court, you get all these hangers-on come out of the woodwork.
Well, I imagine, yeah.
Because everybody's better than you, and everybody wants to help, and everybody can argue the case better than you, and everybody, and trust me, 22 years, I've dealt with a lot of attorneys in other states, big municipalities, and they make the wonderful assumption that I must have two teeth and I'm wearing overalls. Now,
right.
That said, my front two teeth are in fact crowns, and I do have overalls, but that's not
that's not the
point.
Right.
And so a friend of mine, and I don't want to mention his name, he agreed to be co-counsel with me. I had a law clerk working with me at the time, and she was encouraging and worked really hard on the first draft of the merits brief and did a great job. And then I had help from an assistant city attorney in San Francisco, edit it, and a man at the National Association of Attorneys General, edit it. And I learned the hard way that if you have 3 edits that are done in track changes, your mind might melt. And my paralegal was great. We were both in there looking at this in Word, and there was some button on there that says merge. You could take all 3 track changes and press merge. And we were like, oh, we don't know what we're going to get.
Right.
We were like, do it.
Yep.
And that's what we got.
Yep, there you go.
And so anyways, but long story short, we briefed it. I did a moot court at Georgetown because right when we got granted cert, you have to call Georgetown. They do it free for you.
Okay.
But the first person that calls gets the moot. And they have a courtroom there, a built-in courtroom. Yeah. And I remember the lady who runs it at the time. I talked to her on the phone. I said, do you think I'm crazy arguing this myself? She said, yes. Okay. But my co-counsel, who's a very well-known attorney here in town, said the person that knows the record, the facts, the best, should argue the case. And the reason why is because the court can make whatever law it wants. Yeah, there are other cases. You talk about the other cases, but they make the law.
Right.
Who knows the facts?
Right.
And that was persuasive to me. It may not have been persuasive to other people. It was a fight, though. Let me put it this way. For me to get to argue my own case
in front of the United States Supreme Court
that I had litigated for 9 years, it took a toll on me. It was a fight. I know it caused a lot of feelings for other people. And whatever those feelings are, that's up to them.
So the day of court comes, the day that you're
March
in court.
4th, 2014. So I'd already done 2 moots. It snowed the day before.
How'd it go in those?
They were learning experiences. The first one, I used the term respectfully too much because, you're going to argue for the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right. Cross your T's, dot your I's.
That was at NAG, that's the Association of Attorneys General. And the 3-judge panel, those guys that we got were really good, smart. I learned a lot from them. And then we did one at Georgetown. I was much better then, much more prepared then. Well, it wasn't prepared. It's my performance was much better. I got rid of the respectfullys. And so the day before, I went and saw Florida versus Hall argued. It had snowed, a lot. And me and my co-counsel went and watched Florida Hall because I'd never been to an oral argument. So I wanted to get a feel for it. And that was interesting. So the morning of March 4th, you just suit up. I'd stayed up till 3. I wanted all my facts on one page. And I'd been told that Chief Justice John Roberts used to staple his argument into a manila envelope once he got it finished. And so I thought that sounded like a good enough idea for me.
Right. It's good for him.
I'm at the Hilton Garden Inn in D.C. I'm down in the business center until 3 until I get it down to one page. And I literally have timestamps of the videos.
Right.
And the Supreme Court had the videos, and they watched them. So you get in there, and it's beautiful. The courtroom is beautiful, and I'm gonna say I was nervous. I think I'm always nervous in everything I do in life. Anxiety is always there. But I did have to move for the admission of 2 attorneys that I worked with at the time to be members of the Supreme Court.
Right.
Well, that gave me the opportunity to stand at the podium and talk to the Chief Justice. And that took away some of the nerves. But it's all out there for you to listen to.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I had some very interesting dialogue. My first question came from Justice Scalia, my second from Justice Ginsburg, my third from Justice Alito. Me and Justice Scalia got into an interesting argument about whether the courts on appeal had jurisdiction over this qualified immunity appeal. Lots of courts for years were saying no, but I think Plumhoff limited the case that a lot of the courts had been saying we don't have jurisdiction. That's Johnson versus Jones. But it was impossible to process then, and it's still impossible to process.
Well, yeah, well, I'd imagine, it's to sound, poetic, the hollowed halls, it's the U.S. Supreme Court, the Carnegie Hall. the Yankee Stadium, right. You get to argue in front of the the bench that saw Plessy versus Ferguson. You get to see that saw some of the most groundbreaking cases. So what came out of Plumhoff? What law was defined or changed, or how does Plumhoff here almost 10 years later, how does that case ruling affect? I mean, the climate is different now. I mean, it was changing in 2014, but the climate is definitely different now towards interaction with the public and police officers in 2023 than it was in 2004.
Yeah, I want to make a point about that after I tell you the ruling. So Plumhoff springboards a bit off of Scott versus Harris. Scott, they didn't use firearms. It was kind of like a pit maneuver where they ran the guy through. He became paraplegic and sued, and the U.S. Supreme Court 8-1. It may have been Souter was still on the court that dissented, held that it was constitutional, but they didn't use firearms. So springboards off that, and Justice Alito, writing for the court, said that
in yours or in the other?
In mine.
Okay.
Said that Scott was written by Scalia.
Okay.
So he was interested in the jurisdictional issue because footnote 8 of Scott established some law about what the courts can consider, but in evidentiary wise, in summary judgment motions on qualified immunity. But Alito held, see, with qualified immunity, if you answer the first question, and you could, there's a case called Pearson versus Callahan. You can answer them in any question, any order. You don't have to say there was or was not a constitutional violation if you're the court. You could say whether there was or not, it wasn't clear. You can answer the second question first. Or you could say there was no underlying constitutional violation and not even get into the second. And why would you get into the second? Whether the law was clear.
Right.
The Supreme Court answered both questions here. They said no constitutional violation because Rickard posed a grave public safety risk in his continued flight. He never relented. And, a lot of the arguments were, well, the police's response caused the high-speed chase. And that was a facet, I think, in Scott, too. Scott versus Harris as well. That's an argument. That argument was made. The Supreme Court rejected it. There was the argument, well, just let him go. Stop, don't chase him. And even at that time, there were municipalities and police departments.
That was their policy.
Their policy, do not chase. And, but the Supreme Court here held effectively that police don't have to stop pursuing. They don't have to stop pursuing and hope that the person is then going to start doing the speed limit, acting right. Okay. And so, and then the issue about the passenger came up. And Justice Kennedy said, doesn't it make the police's response more dangerous since there's a passenger? And my response to that was the existence of Miss Allen did not make Mr. Rickard less dangerous. Right. And
it had the potential of being more dangerous because at the time the police officers didn't know who they were dealing with in the passenger seat.
They did not.
They obviously could have run the plate and knew what they needed to know about Rickard.
They did run the plate. It came back to a green Saturn.
Oh, okay. So they knew they were dealing with a criminal.
Didn't know,
but they had no idea who was in the passenger seat. It could have been somebody even more dangerous.
But you have to assume her innocence and
right. No, absolutely.
And that's effectively what Justice Kennedy was saying. Assuming she wasn't, what does it mean? And I said, you consider it in the totality of the circumstances, but it doesn't make his conduct, the driver's, any less dangerous. And you have to look at the relative danger to the innocent public.
The threat to the 24 to 29 cars that he sped by.
And then anybody else.
Right. And had he kept going, you never know. Right.
Now, so they said, it was a grave public safety risk. It was reasonable. One argument I made, and I made this argument at the Sixth Circuit in Ohio. One argument that they had made is, well, it was overkill, basically. Too many shots, 15 shots. But the threat never ended until he crashed out. Yeah. And I've defended a lot of police shooting cases. And I knew that police officers are taught shoot at center mass, or at least they were, and shoot to end the threat. You don't just shoot twice. And and so the Supreme Court held that the police officers may continue to use deadly force until the threat ends. Their citation to where that was in the record was my argument at the Sixth Circuit. It wasn't in the record. I mean, I think Officer Plumoff testified to it, but they effectively cited my argument in Ohio as standing for the proposition that they ruled on, that you can keep shooting until the threat is over. I guess it kind of was peculiar to me that, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I have been a certified law enforcement instructor. I know what police officers in shooting cases have told me about their training vis-a-vis shooting until the threat is over. But I don't recall putting forth any evidence. And again, I believe if you look at the opinion, they cite the oral argument that I did in Ohio. So, I guess my argument became part of the law.
Became part of the law, right? So
but they also answered the second question.
So it also crossed state lines.
Yes.
And
yes.
was there any? I mean,
that's very significant.
Yeah.
Because the Arkansas is in what there's a number of federal circuits that courts are in our nation. Arkansas is in what's known as the Eighth Circuit. So the United States Court of Appeals had this occurred in Arkansas, I wouldn't have been in Cincinnati.
Right.
And I wouldn't have been in Western District of Tennessee. I would have been in St. Louis arguing, or St. Paul. I had a case in St. Paul that we can talk about in a little while. It was pretty interesting. But when they crossed state lines, they went from one circuit, from the Eighth to the Sixth Circuit. Well, at the time, that was significant.
Right.
Based on the pre-existing law in the Eighth Circuit and the Sixth Circuit. So I argued fervently, if you're going to hold them to what they should know as law enforcement officers, if there is a divergence between the Sixth and the Eighth Circuit on a particular point of law in this case, you have to hold them to the Eighth Circuit, because that's where they're trained. That's where they came from. So states also, a lot of them have a Uniform Interstate Pursuit Act. So, but they are calling on the radios for Memphis's assistance, Memphis police assistance. Memphis didn't show up until after the shooting. Why? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, some interesting evidence in the case. But yeah. And so, it not only made me have to get licensed elsewhere, but more importantly, they went into a different legal arena.
Right.
And people say, well, the Ninth
having to follow rules that they were not trained to follow, potentially.
Yeah. And so there were, for instance, they stripped themselves of state statutory immunity that is provided to Arkansas law enforcement officers because they were not Tennessee law enforcement. And there is a statutory, and originally Judge Mays said we don't get it. After it came back from the U.S. Supreme Court, he reversed himself on that, I believe. And he also reversed himself on when he was reconsidering the Kelly Allen part of the case. But look, this has almost been 10 years. I did my job. I've had friends that practice different kinds of law raise questions with me, about my personal feelings about it. My personal feeling is that I wish nobody would have died.
Right, absolutely. I mean, there was a tragedy from the get-go.
And I know my clients. I knew them well. I worked with them off and on. They wished.
Yeah.
But look, it's not like you and me out on the street. Police officers have a duty. They're duty bound to stop people that are dangerous. And so this is what you said a minute ago, the legal or at least the societal landscape regarding law enforcement seems to have changed. And I saw it, I believe, in real time with what happened with the city of Ferguson, and of course when George Floyd was killed.
Right.
And those incidents, I wasn't there for I don't know about the specifics about the Ferguson thing. I've seen enough, I think, on the news that it seemed like the Floyd, I think justice was done, in my opinion, because I believe the officer was convicted.
Yes, and sentenced to prison.
So look,
So let me clarify: justice was done against the police officers.
Correct.
Yes. Yes.
I think it's terrible that. I mean, I've seen a lot of shooting cases, and I've questioned sometimes in the cases that I've defended, shooting cases I've defended a lot. Was this officer legitimately in fear of serious physical injury or death of him or herself or a third party? Or was this officer in a situation where he or she concluded, my training says this is where I may use excessive force? I don't have an answer in any given case to that subjectively for me. I can only tell you what my officers that I've represented have told me. But, people assume they know my politics too because I represent government and law enforcement. And anybody that thinks they know my politics or really knows me,
right?
You better be pretty damn close to me,
right?
If you're even going to get close to knowing who the hell I am,
right. And I consider myself one of the lucky ones that gets to know
you know.
So before I want to wrap up Plum off just in the what was going through your head, and I want to talk I don't want to talk about the law, I don't want to talk about the case, I want to talk about Mike Mosley. You're arguing in front of the United States Supreme Court, which is that's the top of the game, right? That is the ultimate court, probably the most powerful court in the world. You walk in. What were you feeling? Did you expect a 9-0? Did you expect a 0-9? Did you expect a 5? How did you expect this to go?
Well,
we have our friend Paul Prater is also an attorney, and he had several cases yesterday, and I got to have a beer with him yesterday afternoon, and he knew going into several of them, okay, this is the law. This is how it's going to go. Did you know? How did you feel going into it? Was it a mixed emotions? Was there a chance you thought you were going to lose this?
No.
Okay.
I knew I was going to win.
Okay.
Because if I was going to lose, why did they take it? If I was going to lose, why did they take it from the Sixth Circuit? Now, a lot of people have said, why did they take it at all?
Right.
And I don't know.
Yeah.
Look, following this, there were a number of forced cases and qualified immunity cases that came after it. Mullinex, which was a GVR, grant, vacate, and reverse. I spoke to the attorney at the Texas Attorney General's office who handled that, and she did not get to orally argue it because when they granted the petition, they issued an opinion that day. That's a GVR, grant, vacate, and reverse. But then there's Kisla. Then there's a number of cases that occurred, but I knew I was going to win, and the reason why I knew I was going to win, I didn't know how I was going to win.
Yeah.
Was it going to be because there was no constitutional violation or the law wasn't clearly established? It turned out, and it was frankly unnecessary for the court to do this. They answered both questions in our favor.
Right.
I don't know why they answered.
Who wrote the opinion?
Alito.
Okay.
Alito. I knew I was going to win because why would they have taken it from the Sixth Circuit? I asked the Sixth Circuit for reconsideration. They said no. And then I was reading the Sixth Circuit's internal operating procedures. And there's this weird kind of second way you can ask for rehearing. And I file it, and I call the clerk's office in Cincinnati. And they're like, you can't file this. And I'm like, your own IOPs say I can.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady had put me on hold for a number of minutes. And she came back and was just sort of gruff and, okay, file it, or whatever. And the Sixth Circuit supplemented their opinion. And when that happened, that seemed, but still saying we were wrong, we had a picture. That seemed like, you remember, was it Rocky 4 with
Ivan Drago?
Yeah.
Yep.
When they finally get him to bleed?
Yeah.
He's human.
Yep.
And that's what it felt like when they supplemented their opinion.
You figured it out, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so but from day one, you ask the other guys that were on the case, I said, this has the potential to go all the way. It crosses lines from one circuit to the next. It's, a high-speed chase. It's the use of deadly force. People have died. For some reason, and I had no basis for thinking that other than just, this seems like a high-profile kind of thing. Mm-hmm. From day one in 2005 when I got the case, I thought it could go. But how did I feel? I felt like we were going to win. I didn't know how. Mm-hmm. First prong, no unconstitutional conduct, or not clearly established. Second prong, what the justices' makeup would be on the court. Would there be a dissent? I didn't know that. I felt like we would win because I didn't feel like they would take the case. And I think they conference it 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
So once you submit it, they conference it and everything. Because the petition for writ of certiorari was filed in the spring of 13, and we didn't get a grant until November. But they take the summer off and all that. But anyways, I knew I was going to win. I just didn't know how. I really was confident we were going to win. I just didn't know how because I felt like they wouldn't take the case. How did I feel walking into the courtroom?
Yeah. As Mike Mosley, not as an attorney, not as as a person. I want to know kind of the emotions you were going through in arguing in front of the United States Supreme Court. Was it just a job?
No. No. Some of my family was there.
There has to be a point when it sets into you that you often hear about people playing, athletes. When they get to the Super Bowl, it's like, wow, this isn't just a game anymore.
Well, here's what I'll say about it. I saw Gary, the other attorney who was arguing it, who I shook his hand. We talked. We had nice chatter. I remember that. My co-counsel, my friend, we sat down. I'd already seen the podium and everything in the desk the day before. I didn't have anything fancy. I had just an expandable blue red ropes or file fold. I didn't have a briefcase or anything. I had what I call my lucky shoes that have they're just some Oxford that I've had for a long time that I paid $90 for. They got a hole in the bottom of them.
Yep.
I had to buy a coat, catty corner to the hotel because I didn't know it was going to snow. So I had to go buy a 3/4 length, and they had you.
Oh, they knew. Yeah,
$350 or something.
Yeah.
I still got the coat; it barely fits. But how did I feel? I go back to what I said earlier. Other than those events, and I know that when we were done, because if you listen to the argument, I had a cold bench. I got asked questions by everybody except for Justice Thomas. But Gary got a hot bench.
Yeah.
And it seemed pretty clear. It seemed pretty that my suspicion we would win was correct based on who was getting the hot bench. I remember leaving and giving my wife a kiss in the Supreme Court. I remember feeling confident that we would win, but also relieved. Look, when they granted cert and it turned out I was going to be writing the merits brief along with the law clerk that worked with me at the time, Keisha, who was now a great practicing lawyer here in town, and then and have it edited and everything. I went to a friend's birthday party at the pizza place, and I gave him a guitar for his birthday. We're guitar players. We used to write songs together, and I had a panic attack.
I imagine.
And I believe. But I wrote the reply cold on this club chair that the reply brief that we have, and sent it to my friend Peter, who was the assistant city attorney in San Francisco, and he did his edits to it. But the truth is those are the things I remember. I can tell you what I remember when I walked out, because you need to understand.
Well, that's my next question.
CNN called me.
Right.
But other than that, I listened to my performance. I remember it in parts. I remember I performed. Maybe it was like you were talking about with an athlete, I knew I had to perform, and I had prepared more for this than anything I'd ever prepared for. Lots of times I just go in court and start gunslinging. Maybe that's a bad.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But sometimes you don't have that kind. But this gave me enough time, and I had lawyers that I worked with that assisted me in other cases, and I was grateful for that, so that they could handle depositions in a couple of the cases. But the bottom line is as I said earlier, I couldn't process it immediately after, and I still can't, and I don't think I ever will.
Yeah.
But I know I've listened to it, and I know that's my voice.
Yeah, and that was you, right?
You know.
Right. So that's kind of plumb off. You can go and see all this stuff, and you can listen to Mike's. I saw it last night. You can listen to his the audio clip. I think it's on several places. You just search plumb off. So I want to kind of talk about. We talked about good cops, bad cops, and that that you have been charged with representing some situations that you would have probably chosen not to.
Yes, but let me say one more thing.
Yeah, please. Anything else?
Had this argument and this decision come down after the situation in Ferguson and after the situation where Mr. Floyd was killed, I don't know I thought at the time that these things were happening, if this case had come down, I don't know it would have come down the same way. Maybe there'd have been more of a split. I don't know.
Yeah.
And going back to your issue, I'm all for requiring more training, but we have to be realistic. Police officers are not robots. Okay, you punch a police officer, punch me right now.
Right.
I'm going to have a fight or flight reaction. They're human beings.
Right. No,
okay?
you're right. Yep.
And we expect them, and I have seen some of my clients really put up with a lot. You've got to have all kinds of strengths mentally and physically to do this job. I will be the first one to tell you that I abhor violence, unnecessary violence, wrongful violence. I abhor racism. I abhor selective enforcement of the laws. So getting to what you're going at, if I had cases where it's been difficult because I may not agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And have I ever turned one down because I disagree? Well, until the last couple of years, I have been working for governmental agencies. You do what you're assigned. I had one case where the plaintiff, for various reasons, spooked me, and I, had a lot of guns and stuff, and I tried to give that case away.
Yeah.
And my boss wouldn't let me. So you do your best. But look, I'll be the first one to say, I think one of my skills over the years, I think that I've gotten that honed is I can see a bad case a mile away.
Right.
And again, I'm a civil lawyer. I'm not a criminal lawyer. It's generally speaking about money. That's what the plaintiff is suing for. Now, have there been cases where you make changes to a court system, or you make changes to police
policy
practice?
or law?
Yes.
Yep.
And that's all, negotiable too. But if it's bad a mile away, then I see, it's indefensible or close enough to, or the risk is too great, I prevail upon those with the checkbook to get it worked out quick. Because for two reasons. The main reason is the more you fight those cases, the more you increase the other side's attorney's fees.
Right.
And that's the tail that wags the dog in a lot of these Section 1983 cases, which are civil rights cases. So Section 1983 was, enacted in the late 1800s and was effectively dormant, other than some weird tax cases, until Monroe versus Pape in the 50s. And this beyond the necessities, as Justice Kennedy put it to me at oral arguments, beyond the necessities of our discussion. But I have a great talk about Monroe versus Pape. I used to teach as an adjunct at law school, civil liberties. A friend of mine who's a professor over there teaches it and allowed me 3 or 4 times to teach it. And the backstory on how Section 1983 really got legs and started being used as Monroe versus Pape. And it's a fascinating story. And the Monroe family eventually ended up recovering $16,000, I believe, after a jury in the 50s.
Wow.
Against this officer named Frank Pape from Chicago. So, but that's it. Yeah, maybe if you want to. There's cases, but I just did my job.
So what are some other
bills to pay?
Well,
I did
right,
my
no.
job. But you know what, my friends, that have questioned me, they'll say, well, that's a cop out. What do you think about the real case? Well, okay, do you really want to know? I already said it. I wish nobody had died.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is one of the discussions I've had with our friend Paul. Is there are a set of laws, and your job is to use those laws to prove your point and to stay within those laws. I mean, that is, and in the kind of business, in contract and legal and business law, the contracts are clear. In yours, there's a little bit of interpretation on this, and that's what I think makes it kind of a different animal on its own. One of the things I want to ask about is, this is arguably the most notable case of your career, would you say? I mean, the Supreme Court. What are some other notable cases that if you had to write Mike Mosley's greatest hits on being an attorney, what would be some other notable cases that or interesting, or something that is of interest to non-law people?
Well, Mike Mosley's greatest hits probably wouldn't include the law at all.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that soon. So,
and this is my vocation, and for better or for worse. But there's been so many. But I did do. So you can argue. You go to, let's say, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. If you lose, and you argue to 3 judges, you lose there. You can ask for rehearing en banc, EN_BANC. And I had a case that did that. It wasn't my case originally. I just argued it in bank. It was my friend's. And it was argued in St. Paul because there is a courthouse in St. Paul for the 8th Circuit and in
St. Louis.
And I love St. Paul.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge Replacements fan. And when
Right.
Okay, so that was 12 judges. And people ask me about the Supreme Court all the time. That was called Jane Doe versus the city of Marietta, Arkansas.
What was the case?
It was a case where a police officer was accused of statutorily raping, I believe, a young lady that was 16. He was not my client. Mm-hmm. The city was. Mm-hmm. And the issues that I believe he was charged with a crime. Should have been.
Right,
if
absolutely.
that occurred, he should have been. I've had a few of those cases. I've never represented the offenders in those cases. It's always been the municipality that employed them. Because for all intents and purposes, the plaintiffs are not going after that individual. No risk management, insurer, whatever is going to cover that individual. It's a criminal act. But the city, to get to a city, goes back to a case called Monell from 1978. You couldn't sue cities under Section 1983 during the time of Monroe, from the 50s until 78. Then in 78, the U.S. Supreme Court said, Section 1983, which says a person that violates someone's rights. Well, they do this, sort of hop, skip, and jump to figure out that, cities and counties are persons.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if you say so.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a cause of action for it. And if there weren't, Congress can create one at any time.
Right.
It's like qualified immunity. A few years ago, or a couple years ago, I think the House actually passed a bill. The House of Representatives in D.C. passed a bill to augment and eliminate some of qualified immunity. And they have the authority to do it. I think it probably died in the House. I don't know.
Yeah.
Will that happen? I don't know. I think it's unwise. But what I think, I can't be objective. And so, this case went to 12 judges. That was much harder to argue. And plus, the record was huge, and I hadn't handled it until the point of the 12th judge argument. But it happened in October of 2013. So that was a great practice.
Right. Warm up. Yeah, absolutely.
But I got hit. I don't know how many judges hit me there. It's hard to find that oral argument because there's 2. There's one that my friend argued to the 3-judge panel, and you've got to put in the case number or something to find the 12. But it was what I call firefight, or it was whatever. Went to Top Gun when
yeah, dogfight.
It was a dogfight.
Yeah,
and it was whether the city could be held liable for the actions of the police officer based on whatever had occurred with prior events with other officers. And I don't know, a week or so after I argued it, got back to town, we got an opinion, one sentence, the district court who had ruled in favor of the city here, the federal district court here. The district court is affirmed by an equally divided court. The district court is affirmed 6-6.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't get any closer.
Right.
But I've had some wild ones. I don't know. Just off the top, I guess I should have put some more thought to that. But I guess I had a case about fireworks one time, whether the city could regulate fireworks, and whether or not, because the fireworks stand had been in operation for all these years, the city could come back and regulate fireworks. So you hear people say, well, they're grandfathered in. What they're really saying is a non-conforming pre-existing use of property. But that doesn't give you a right if the particular use is potentially injurious to the public.
Right.
And so that was our argument. Well, that one went to the Eighth Circuit too. That was my first Eighth Circuit argument. But I've had a lot of cases, and there's always I got a wild one right now that I could write a book about it. I mean, it's wild, and because it's ongoing, I probably shouldn't talk.
Well, we'll have you back on to talk about it when you're done. We'll have you back on.
When my book comes out.
Yeah, when your book comes out. So one of the things I've gotten to love about Mike is, and there's so much more to Mike than law. While the law career and experience is so impressive. I mean, the stories and the Supreme Court stories and the cases you've worked is super impressive. Mike is also one of the best guitar players I've ever seen. And Mike has do you call it junior or JR?
Well, I've got
so you can
on all the streamings.
You can find it.
3.
Okay, so Mike is, and if you go to the Instagram post I posted to advertise for this episode, I play some of Mike's music in the background. So you started playing guitar as a young kid. What made you want to pick up a guitar? Elvis?
No.
I just say that because you're wearing an Elvis shirt.
Eddie Van Halen.
Eddie Van Halen, yeah.
Eddie Van Halen. Yeah, Eddie Van Halen. Since third grade. I guess it was in third grade when Jump came out.
Yeah, that would have been, 1984 was that album. And next year, that'll be 40 years old.
Yeah.
That album. I remember going to Kmart and buying the tape. And my mom looked at the tape and it's got the Cherub Angel smoking a cigarette on it. And my mom looked at it. She's like, what kind of music are you listening to? And I was 9.
I can't remember the kid's name, but in third grade, this kid was talking about this video at lunch. And I don't know if we had MTV at the time. The first video I ever saw on MTV was Oh Sherry by Steve.
Oh, yeah.
And let me tell you something. That song is a jam.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody. That's a heck of a jam. But anyways, Eddie Van Halen. I mean, without a doubt. And in the 80s, as I started playing at 12 or so. And the way I started.
Were your parents musical? Did you have music in the family?
Well, I mean, they listened to.
Right.
They listened to more classic country.
Okay.
And we would ride around. I like to listen to that stuff now. Ronnie Millsap, and it gives me good memories. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, they didn't play instruments. My sister loves to sing. And we're going to do a song together soon.
Awesome.
Yeah. We have played before years and years ago. I think we played, we sat down and played a Beatles song together. But I was in line, and I don't know why I wanted to do this. I was a little guy, whatever I am now. I was a little fella. I guess I was 12, and I wanted to sign up for football. And my dad came from work, picked me up. We went down to the place where you signed the Optimist Club down here at the time. And we're in line. And my dad's wearing his tie, and I don't know if my mother and he had talked about it or this was something, but I got the impression, and he could differ with me, he'd have done anything to keep me from
playing football.
Oh, I'd have gotten, drilled. Okay. I've played football,
Mm-hmm.
And I broke my finger once at the University of Central Arkansas. When I was in college, some friends went there and we played night football with some guys, and they ran me down the middle, and I thought I broke more than just my finger, but it ended up, I thought I had a cyst on it. And 30 years later, I go to the doctor because it was hurting, and it's not. It was called an enchondroma, and the doctor suggested it be removed, and so I have a scar there
Yep.
where they took it off. I had a lot of surgeries, but I get off track really. But my dad said, what can I do? Basically,
Yeah, Mike and I had a conversation this morning. We've had the same back surgery. So we're in the back surgery, the Fusion Club.
Yep. So I think basically my dad said, "What can I do to keep you from signing up?" And I said, "I want a guitar." He took me down to the guitar shop, the local guitar shop, and got me my first electric, and I don't remember the brand, but it was baby blue, and signed me up for lessons with those folks. And it was two older folks and then a younger guy. You start off with the lady teaching you, and she taught me Proud Mary. And,
Yeah.
and then you go with the younger guy, and he taught me Fade to Black.
Nice.
Off of Ride the Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
And then, then I started taking it for another guy, and his claim to fame was that once he had played with Pat Benatar. But he taught me how to improvise, and he taught me modes. And so anytime I play a solo, it's rarely the same twice because I'm within the mode. But I've been playing since I was 12. And Paul Prater, our mutual friend.
Who holds the record for being on the show the most?
Yeah. Well, Paul's like an angel to me. And we've been friends since we were very young, 6th grade maybe. We took karate together. We went to elementary school together before we did music, any of that. And then eventually, he started playing drums and I started playing guitar, and we put a band together. And he was my first drummer that I got to play with, and he will be my last.
Yeah.
And he is he's always got sage advice. He's sensitive to all his friends when he needs to be. He's courageous and tough when he needs to be. And he's just, in my opinion, a really great guy to look up to. I've got a lot of really nice friends. You're one of them that I look up to. A lot of guys I grew up with, just great guys. I mean, couldn't have been luckier. Yeah. The group of guys. And then my folks are just, nobody could have, I could not have hoped for or paid for or contrived any way to get better folks. I got great folks, a wonderful sister, and then the rest of my family, and I don't want to get too personal, but my point is, I just gave it hell for years playing guitar.
Yep.
And then, back then I couldn't sing. I'm not sure I still can, but I couldn't. I remember trying. And over the years, I worked at a record store local here back in the 90s, and I met a fella named Tim, who was about 15 years older than me. And we mutually loved a band called Jellyfish, which put out 2 albums in the early 90s. And they were, they dressed up like they were, the Partridge Family or something, but the records were so good. These 2 records were amazing. And we bonded over Jellyfish. And then the guitarist that played on the first record is a guy named Jason Faulkner. And I recommend everybody to listen to as much Jason Faulkner as you can. He's produced a lot. He's played with just about everybody. I think he played with St. Vincent on the last tour. Okay. He plays with Beck.
Okay.
But his own songs are just, he's a big influence on me. And then, but Tim and I started, we just loved the Beatles and power pop. But see, the problem with Jellyfish is it came out at the same time that Nirvana.
Right.
And Pearl Jam was coming out. So they were, the Posies had already kind of been out, had kind of a power pop thing. Matthew Sweet had already been out with some power pop. There was plenty of power pop. You're going back to, who started it? That's an interesting conversation. Was it Alex Chilton? You got to look back at Phil Seymour, the Dwight Twilley Band, all this stuff. But Jellyfish, those songs were so perfectly written.
Well, you bring up Matthew Sweet. Matthew Sweet's one of my favorites, and we've talked a lot about Matthew Sweet.
Yeah, saw him live in Memphis.
And we, I've been lucky enough to sit in on a few of your recordings when you and Paul record, and I've said this before, and I get a lot of vibe out of your music. I get a lot of Pete Droge vibe out of your music, and I don't know if you don't know Pete Droge, check him out. He had one hit called "If You Don't Love Me, I'm Going to Kill Myself" or something like that. But the rest of the stuff's so good. I saw him open for Tom Petty on the Wildflowers tour.
Oh man!
And I mean, it was a great tour, a great show. But Pete Droge really stuck with me. The other one is Matthew Sweet. I get a lot of Matthew Sweet vibe out of your music.
Are we really going to pass Wildflowers that quick?
Well, no, let's talk about Wildflowers.
Guitarists.
Well, remember, I'm going to ask you. I told you I'm going to ask you about.
Campbell and Lindsey Buckingham. Yeah. That's who I would like to emulate more these days. Don't get me wrong. Back in the '80s, I learned Eruption.
Yeah, right.
I played it rough.
Right.
But you can ask some friends. I learned Eruption.
Yep.
But
no, Wildflowers is one of the great. I mean,
that record is Crawling Back to You. It is such a.
If you don't know it, Tom Petty Wildflowers is one of the great.
Crawling Back to You is
best.
such an amazing. And there's a video out there of them doing it live. But the whole record is just amazing.
You know, I have this conversation with a lot of friends about albums that are good A to Z, and I think Wildflowers is on that
A
list
to
for
Z.
sure.
A to Z. Let's go back to Matthew Sweet. Girlfriend.
Oh, perfect.
A
album.
to Z.
So there's the extended version where they have the like 4 songs added onto it. He does a cover of my favorite Neil Young song, Cortez the Killer, and he does a cover of Cortez the Killer. It's so good. The other band I don't want to get. We'll get back to Wildflowers if you want. I get a lot of Pete Droge vibe from your music. I get a lot of Matthew Sweet. I also get, and I pointed this out to you. I also get some early Cars vibe from your music.
I love the Cars.
And when I brought that up to you, and you said, "Oh my God, I'm gonna put a synthesizer in there," and I thought, that you knew exactly what I was talking about.
So my current project is Junior Moz Collective.
It's JRMOZ Collective, and that's what I posted on. That's
Junior Moz Collective.
That's the music that I posted on Instagram.
Before that, I was the project I did before that was Junior Mosley with a Z. Junior Mozley.
Okay.
That's all out there. And then before that, I co-wrote songs in a band called Mosley, but I didn't sing in that band.
Okay.
Another great guy, producer in town singing it. Great songwriter, producer of his own right. He agreed to sing because I was always self-conscious about my vocals.
Right.
And I still am. But the Junior Moz Collective stuff is really, at its core, me and Paul Prater. And we've worked with a number of people in various respects, and that's cool.
Well, I'm gonna hop on one of these days. You know, I hopped on a Direwolf song and played and played just a few notes, and Paul and our friend Soidan made me sound really good. But
I played a few solos on a few of the Direwolf's songs.
For a guitar player, I make a really good magician. Well, I had the hand injury. You know, that was one of my things. Is I really wanted to get good at guitar, and during my divorce / COVID self-improvement projects where I wanted to learn to cook.
Yeah.
So I just absorbed and read cookbooks, and I tried, and I'm fairly confident in my culinary abilities. And then I got to playing guitar, and I was playing very, very regularly, and I enjoyed it. And then I had an accident, cut my hand in half, and I still can't to this day bend I have no strength in my pinky and my ring finger on the hand.
That's news to me. But I'll tell you a related story. One of my other favorite songwriters is Paul Westerberg.
Oh yeah.
And he also apparently, the way I read it, he was screwing around with trying to get some wax off of a candle holder, and got himself with a screwdriver or something, and that hurt his hand. And then recently, Keith Richards came out and was talking about his arthritis, and I thought this was neat. He takes it as a positive. It's made him play differently, but that he took it as a positive. Like, I'm learning. The way I read the story was, I'm learning. It's given me a new approach.
Yeah.
Guitar.
Well, Iommi is another one. He lost the top of his fingers, and so he figured it out. If you have a chance to listen to, or a way to listen to Howard Stern, last week Keith Richards was on Howard Stern. It was a 2-hour interview. It was great. Keith Richards was really great.
Well, you can't beat a great. It's hard to beat a great Stones chord progression.
Well, and I mean, the real story with Keith Richards is, how's that guy still alive? You know, I mean, it's the stories that he told on Stern. Well, anyway, we'll get back to it.
Some of us run on Motorola.
That's right. Some of it, yeah.
But Matthew Sweet, Girlfriend, sad.
That's a great album.
But like Thought I Knew You and Winona and great record. But later Matthew Sweet stuff.
Have you heard his new stuff he's doing with Susanna Hoffs?
I have.
The Under the Covers. That's a fun project. I don't love them all. I don't love them all.
Faulkner played with Susanna Hoffs on one of her records.
And Susanna Hoff is the girl that does the eye look in the Bengals video, if you don't know. Then every 14-year-old boy remembers that. Every man remembers that as being 14.
Have you seen, she doesn't look like she's aged.
No, she looks the same. I follow her on Instagram, and Susanna Hoff is still a fox.
But good, songwriter, guitar player too. But we could go on and on about all those. My favorite, we're going to talk about that. But I will say, though, as to Matthew Sweet, the friend Tim that I wrote songs with back in the 90s, where I sort of started, and I've got the CDs of this stuff. And I mean, we did good. I did it on a mini disc, multi-track. I bought the first residential or commercial CD burner you could buy from Philips. I got those.
Yeah.
And I listened to them recently, and I'm going to release some of them.
Nice. Good.
But that gave me comments. He passed in 15. And I have a song that I put out in the last 6 months. It's called Tim A with Junior Moz Collective. And that's for him.
Awesome. So you released a song this week called Ghosts.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Ghosts. Ghosts was Paul Prater and I had the music to it, and we tracked it, just a guitar and his drums, and I didn't have any words to it. And we tracked it probably 2 months ago, and it had been sitting there, and I'm working on this other thing. And so I'd written some lyrics, and I'm usually pretty quick about, I don't edit enough. Tim, who passed, was always advocating for me to edit, and that's the best thing I tell a songwriter is it's okay to edit. Mm-hmm. But this one, Ghosts, I felt like I worked really hard on the lyrics, and then put a lot of synth on it, 2 different synthesizers actually. Paul's doing the drums, and then a couple of lead parts. But I thought it was timely.
Yeah, right.
Because it's Halloween season. It's not a Halloween song.
Right.
But it's not my usual Poison Pen songs, and that's the thing. I'm a storyteller. I'm not a storyteller like a Tom Petty, or maybe I am. Because Wildflowers is probably all built off of his own personal experience. Mm-hmm. But the stories I tell are really sort of attempts to cope with, adversity.
Right.
And sometimes they can be, the thing I love about Tom Petty, swinging, man. Went down swinging. He always had a good, you know what I mean? Like,
well, I'll tell you, I think Tom Petty's,
Billy the Kid. He always had a good line,
That the stuff he did with the Wilburys was just spot on as well. Jeff Lynne pulled out everything he could out of those 3 guys. 3 of the greatest musicians ever. Jeff Lynne pulled that out.
They did like layers. What I've been told by the guy that sang in Mosley is they did layers and layers of acoustics, and then put the drums on later. But yeah, those are great. George Harrison. All of them. But Petty, man, it just, I don't know. I feel like I relate to that dude.
Yeah.
Just because he wore his heart on his sleeve in a lot of ways with a lot of those songs. And that's all right. And that's real. And it's okay to wear your heart on your sleeve if that's who you are.
Right.
And if you say that that's not okay, if somebody says it's not okay, I don't care.
Right. Tom Petty didn't care either. So.
I really, like this point of our lives.
Right. So this is the question we talked about earlier.
Song? Okay, I don't give a shit.
I wanted to ask you about, and I don't. We're running long. If you don't mind sticking around a little bit longer, we can go as long as we want. I know you've got some stuff this afternoon.
Yeah, you want to know what those are?
So I want to know.
I've got lidocaine injections in my shoulder because it's seized up.
Right.
I tried a massage last night. I got to do lidocaine injections here in just a little bit. I'll go as long as you want.
Okay.
I can't go as long. I don't know what the hell as long as you want means.
So, So let's give you a new job. You're a Mike Mosley concert promoter, and you get to put together the Mike Mosley Music Festival. You get 3 bands, living or dead. Who is your opener? Who is your middle? And who closes the show? Now, I talked about this with Brandon Ringo and Paul Prater last week, and I failed to mention one of the bands, and it went off. And so, if you just want to talk about bands you really want to see,
No, I want to do this. I want to do this.
one of the ones that I failed to mention that I regretted is I would have done anything to have been able to see Prince.
Oh, that'd be cool.
To see Prince in his prime would have been the shits. That would have been so rad.
Well, okay. So opener, middle, and close. Okay.
And mine changes every day too. So I'm I mean it just, if you got to pick a couple bands today that you wanted to put together.
I'll get flack for what how I'm gonna say this, but it's, again, I don't give a shit. Is that okay to say shit?
You can say yeah.
I don't give a shit.
Right, yeah.
I'm gonna say Paul Westerberg opens, Petty plays middle, and Van Halen is the headliner.
The original Van Halen.
Don't ask me that question. I love singing Agar, and I love the songs with Diamond Dave. It just depends on which song you're talking about.
Right.
I mean, the song 5150 off of that record.
Great album.
I mean, and Live Without a Net, the video. We had the cassette. I mean, the
VHS.
VHS.
Yeah.
I wore that thing out, man. They give it hell.
Yep.
Diamond Dave. I mean, Unchained. That's a drop D. That's maybe the most energetic song I could ever think of. Unchained. I love them both. And these people say, "Oh, this, that, Dave this, Dave that." Who gives a shit?
Right.
If I like a song, I like a song. I like fucking K.D. Lang. I like Annie Lennox. I listen to Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass.
Yeah.
I listen to any damn thing I want to. This is fucking America.
What's it? Whipped Cream and Other Delights?
Whatever.
Yeah, it's a great album by Herb Albert.
Yeah, but I mean, this is America.
Yeah.
Tell me what to freaking listen to.
So,
and I may come out with something soon that's real, soft and mellow. In fact, I will. In the next 2 or 3 songs, you're going to see something from me that's going to be very, very soft and mellow.
Well, I want to see you work on an acoustic. I've got some acoustics in the other room that I'll send one home with you, and I want to see your work on an acoustic. You've got a pretty killer, yeah.
I got 2 now.
Yeah.
I got 2 now, and they both sound good, but I'm a big electric piano guy. I've got a Wurlitzer. Tuning it, I can't do it. I've got to get somebody to do that. But I've got a 200A Wurlitzer, and I've got a upright piano I bought from my other friend Tim. He's a good guy. And I've always wanted a Fender Rhodes piano because that sound.
Yeah.
But Wurlitzer's okay. I'll take it.
I'm going to lean on you a little bit.
Lean on me, bro.
I've talked old Prater. I had this idea and Paul said that it would be a good Direwolf song if I could figure it out, and he'd give it a whirl. I'm obsessed with the story of The Watchmen, the comic book The Watchmen, and they turned into a movie and then a TV show. And I just have this idea of a song about that, the idea of The Watchmen. And I've got a few things written, so I'll lean on you and you can have me work on this.
That's fine. I know nothing of that. You should also know, I'm happy to concede, I have huge gaps in my education, both schooling and music, literature. Huge gaps in my education.
You know what? Do you read? Have you ever read comic books?
No, not really.
Would you want to read one?
No.
Okay. Then watch the movie. It's
Last
not as good
book
as
I
the
read
comic.
was Trouble Boys by Bob Muir, who is or at least was, but I think he still is a reporter for the Commercial Appeal in Memphis. But it's about the Replacements, and he had, as I understand it, assistance from Paul Westerberg and Tommy Stinson. Also, Tommy's a great songwriter. Was the bass player. Bob Stinson was a great, added at such a explosive element. Chris Mars, great drums. I mean, Coming Out. Go back to Let It Be and listen to Coming Out.
Okay.
I mean, the part where they go from just raging to Paul snapping in the piano, and it's jazzy. And then, I mean, did I say the Replacements? I said Paul Westerberg.
You said Paul Westerberg.
I want to revise that.
That'd be the
I'm going to
Replacements.
say Replacements, Petty and the Heartbreakers, and Mike Campbell and Benmont Tench have to be there, and then Van Halen. Benmont Tench.
Yep.
I mean, listen to what is that song? What is that song? Tench does this amazing Wurlitzer solo where he just goes from the top to the bottom. What is that damn song?
Well, while you think of that, I'm gonna throw a question at you. You've recorded how many songs? Dozens of songs.
I counted it a couple years ago, and I'd recorded. Well, if you count the stuff in the '90s, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's say
It's over 100.
Over 100 songs. You haven't played live in.
Last time I played live was right after I argued at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay.
And you know, I don't. Paul and I work together. The idea of having to recruit people that are just doing it because I'm paying them,
Right.
is doesn't feel it's not fun to me. I would play out acoustic somewhere, and I used to do that in law school. I'd go to the Flying Saucer Bar out here, play acoustic, you know, and I would do, you know, Message in a Bottle, or, you know, Elliott Smith, love Elliott Smith.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do Say Night's Heaven, but haven't played out in a long time. Don't need to. I like to record.
Yeah.
I like to write, and more than anything, I just like to listen back to what I did.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, to me, mowing the grass. I don't mow the grass anymore. I got a really great guy that mows the grass. But I get done mowing the grass in the old days. I'd stand there and just look at it. And be proud. I was like, it's like washing the dishes. And my wife, everybody will tell you he doesn't wash the damn dishes. But when I used to live in this one house in front of my folks, there was no dishwasher. So you had to hand wash the dishes. I'd look at them, they were clean dishes. It made me happy.
You know what's funny
I
is
just want to listen to the damn song that
I had this conversation with somebody recently. One of my greatest pleasures used to be shoveling the snow.
Well,
and I would, you don't get the snow here that we get in Colorado. And I remember going out at 5 o'clock in the morning and just the silence. And it's that, you know, I follow several of those satisfying things on Instagram where it's like the lines being drawn and just, you know, and just the you know,
I'm not on social media.
Yeah,
I have seen
but just the actual, like, seeing the progress of, you know, 8 inches of snow being shoveled and just seeing the lines. It was the quiet. And I also had 2 young kids, and it was the quietest time of my day. 5 o'clock in the morning. It's still dark. It's snowing a little bit.
Nobody's calling you.
No, I leave the phone inside. I'm not even listening to music.
I get up early in the morning like that to work because somebody. But no, I'm with you. I like to quiet them. Isn't it funny? Like, it could be 8 o'clock at night. I guess it's just the lack of cars and things going on. But 5 in the morning, the calm.
Well, here I can hear. Can you hear the trains from your place? Yeah,
yeah. When they're doing their thing. But if you don't hear the trains, you know, it's the calm is nice.
Well, that's one of the things that you and I've talked about, and I won't get too personal on this, but one of the things you and I've talked a lot about is mental health issues with men, and one of the things that I struggle with a lot is slowing the circus down.
I can't.
You know, and I can't either. And I really struggle with that. And if you know, I fall asleep with my TV on because I have to have something going on. And it's terrible for my sleep, but I struggle with the quieting down, and I need to go back to those days of shoveling snow and having that be kind of my thing. So
with the old days when I didn't have 2 spinal fusions and hadn't had knee surgery, you know, I jogged all the time, and then I played soccer for years and years, and I was fit at one time in my life. And those days I slept like a baby. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But since then, I've had also septoplasty. I sleep with a damn CPAP.
So I'm supposed to sleep with a CPAP. I have not been, but I'm supposed to. So
it's not fun. Well, you know what? I'll be honest. It's kind of turning into like a security blanket.
Yeah. No. You know what, Mike? I sleep so much better with a CPAP. I sleep so much better. I got it because my ex-wife, I snored so bad, and now I fall asleep with the TV on, and it's whatever. But. So, Mike, we've been going for 90 minutes, and is there anything else you want to that we didn't hit that I?
No, I mean, we could talk, you know, music all the live long day, and I meant it. You know, I mean, I think lately I've been getting into classic country, like I listened to riding around with my parents as a kid, and those are fond memories. But I like Sade. Sade.
Yeah.
I get in trouble for the way I say it wrong. You know, all of her stuff. The Sundays. I would do anything if they'd come out with another record. But I also was raised. I bought "Injustice for All" from Metallica the day it came out at Musicland. They were closing the gates in the mall, and I got it on a cassette tape.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the last one I really loved by them. But that's not to say that I'm knowledgeable enough about what they've done since then to say one way or the other. But AC/DC. I mean, nobody can crank out 3 or 4 chords and swing and get that funk out. And I love Bon Scott and I love Brian Johnson. They're both great. AC/DC, one of the best bands out there. Love them. And, you can put yourself, music's funny. You can decide to put yourself in a somber, even depressed mood with music, or you can choose to liven things up with what you put on. And so, don't get me wrong. What was it? Kurt Cobain that said, I miss the comfort of being sad.
Yeah.
Been there.
Yeah.
Been there.
Well, I remember, I think it was Charles Bukowski who wrote something about one day you're sad, the next day you're a little bit less sad, the next day you're even a little bit less sad, and eventually you're going to be sad about not being sad anymore.
Yeah, that's sort of
If you've never read Chuck Bukowski, oh man,
good times.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
This is great music. People say, "Oh, your stuff kind of sounds like the '90s." Great. Because in the 90s, I couldn't write stuff that sounded like the 90s. So now if I'm writing now, screw it, I'll take it.
Right. Well, I want to real quick plug October 29th. My friend Ryan Roth is going to interview me. I'll post a little bit more about it, so you can find that on the Mystery Collection Facebook page or follow the Mystery Collection on the Instagram. You can send questions ahead of time to Ryan if you don't want to ask him in live time. Ryan's going to collect those on his Facebook page. I've got a couple other. I've got Terry Tyson, who is probably the leading expert in seance and the idea of spirit communication. I've got him coming on in November.
You were supposed to ask me about ghosts.
Oh, right. Yes.
Go
yes.
ahead,
No.
keep talking.
No. Let's. Mike has a ghost story.
No. You finish.
Well,
not a ghost story. I'm going to tell you my philosophy.
Oh, okay.
Finish your. I'm sorry.
Well, that's it. Those are the shows. I'm still plugging along. I've got a few that I'm working on getting booked still. So if you have an option or an idea, or you want to come on the show, reach out. This show's really turning into just, when I first started it was about ghosts and magic mostly. But now what it is I have an extraordinary life, and it's because I'm surrounded myself with people that are extraordinary. And everybody's got a story, and I want to find. I'm the luckiest. Mike talked about being lucky to have friends, and the family has. And I'm the luckiest kid in the entire world. And I mentioned to Roth the other day about how grateful I am for him and Paul Prater. I've told him several times online or on air. And Mike, you're one of the ones. I'm so glad that we've met. It's one of those things where I think that we dudes like us, and we all kind of find each other.
The feeling is beautiful.
And Mike is Mike and I've had several really, really heavy conversations outside of music and outside of law about being dads and about struggling with the imposter syndrome and some insecurities and being husbands and being those kind of things. And so I love you, buddy, and I appreciate you coming in.
Hey, thanks. For anybody that does come on, you got to understand this is fun. This is a lot of fun.
Good.
The ghost thing.
Yeah. So I always ask Mike. I always ask a guest to talk about if they have a ghost story, and we got wrapped up, and I know Mike's got something. So fire away.
It's not a story.
Okay.
So ghosts and aliens and I all have a deal.
Okay.
I don't go around talking about their shit.
Okay.
And I don't get taken up into a spaceship or have to see some little kid ghost.
Okay.
Okay. Now that I've said this on,
it'll be on YouTube by this afternoon.
So we're
Yeah.
already on. I'm hoping I haven't breached the deal I have with the ghosts and the aliens. That's my ghost story.
There you go. All right. Well, keep that in mind, everybody. If you don't want to be visited by aliens or be visited by a ghost, don't talk shit about ghosts and aliens. Deal. So, all right, buddy. Well, thanks, Mike. Everybody, check out on October 29th. I'm going to be in the hot seat, and Ryan Roth is going to interview me. Terry Tyson, I've got to get the date. I don't know. I want to say I think it's the 9th of November. I don't know. I'll be back in Colorado for a couple weeks in November. And then be back here to see Gary Holt and Exodus on the 18th. Hey, we're going to go see Goat Whore on Friday the 3rd, the band Goat Whore. So if you want to go with us, they're at the Rev Room.
I've never heard of. I don't mean to disparage them or anything. I've never heard of Goat Whore.
Other than Prater's hat.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, right.
But what a name!
Oh, dude, I've seen them a couple times. They're from New Orleans, and I've seen them a couple times.
You're gonna have to live up to Goat Whore.
Oh no, that's
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somebody better break a finger.
So their band opening for them is called Spider, Spiter. And I was doing some research on them last night, and they're crazy. Just check them out. They're rad. But the lead singer of Spider, his band that he used to be in was called Shitfucker.
Oh, shitfucker. Oh, no. Goat Whore, no, I don't know. But shitfucker. Yeah, right. I mean, I've got a mural at home of their first. No, I've never heard of
I saw a band in Denver.
But listen, if you're going to be called shitfucker,
you better fuck some shit up.
Yeah.
I saw a band in Denver years ago at a party. This is a story maybe that we can talk about when Roth interviews me. I was invited to a party that Ron Jeremy had in Denver, Colorado.
Did you go?
Fuck yeah, I went. Why would you not go? Ron Jeremy invites you to a party. You go to a party.
Some of my philosophies: live carefully. That doesn't include going to that party.
Well, the band, here's the story of that. The band was called the Hate Fuck Trio. And it was 5 dudes. And they called themselves the Hate Fuck Trio. I thought that was so funny.
Good, though?
No, they were fucking terrible. But it was a Ron Jeremy party. And so it was, story for another day. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. And Mike, I love you, buddy. Thanks for coming in.
Love you too.
So keep it.